emergency room here, but we don't have any confirmed information from OPD yet on the extent of the injuries, but just from the urgency of watching what's going on back and forth in front of us, clearly the injuries are severe. The emotions here are raw as people just don't know. And at this point, it's not an overstatement to say that they are absolutely desperate to find out some information. But that just gives you a sense of the enormity of this situation that police from multiple jurisdictions are having to deal with. So, you know, Stuart, at this point, as we're standing here outside the emergency room and you're listening to this raw emotion with these folks not knowing, this is tough.
It's tough to see and tough to witness, especially because we see at least 4 different gurneys that are still waiting. So that means that more patients could potentially be coming to this location very soon. You got the ambulances that are lined up at this area as well. And we're still seeing that huge amount of vehicles that are rushing that direction, OPD vehicles or Orange County vehicles that are rushing that direction, pickup truck wise, and potentially going to bring more and more people back. So, I mean, here's another ambulance that's just exiting from this area. I'm not sure if it's involved even with that because the hospital still has to do its regular operations and emergencies as well. But as you mentioned, the raw emotion of the people that have been witnessing this, that they have their loved ones that they're uncertain about whether or not they're actually coming out.
Right.
We've been still waiting to hear back from Orlando police as to whether or not this situation is over. Obviously, they're bringing people who were inside the club to the hospital at this point, but we do not know if that situation has also ended. So it's still a very developing story.
And I think it bears pointing out, Stuart, that last night, you remember with the shooting over at Plaza Live, I mean, already they have had such a long, violent weekend, and now they're having to respond to this. But at least they're getting assistance from multiple jurisdictions all over the city, greater Orlando. You know, we've seen the Seminole County Sheriff's Department, Orange County Sheriff's Department, as well as OPD trying to get this scene secure. What did you hear down at the club about the gunman or gunmen?
Well, see, what I heard originally from witnesses who were actually inside of the nightclub, they said that as soon as they were during the middle of the party, someone came in, opened fire on them, and when that fire first began, that's when they started to duck for cover. Once they ducked for cover, they were told by numerous other people that it was all just a joke and things were going to calm down. At that point, people started to stand, go back to the party because the music was still playing at that point. But as one witness points out to me, they looked up and the DJ was no longer there, potentially having seen the muzzle shots behind them that they were unaware of. That's when more shots started to ring out again. Upwards of 50 shots is what one witness was telling me, and at that point, that's when other people started to try and crawl out of that building. So, Bob, you know, a very fluid situation where a lot of people saw a lot of people hurt and dead there as well.
Stuart, I talked to a man who had not seen his brother in 20 years, and he had come down from New York to visit him and was actually with him at the club tonight, and said that he had just stepped outside to get a bite to eat from the club, and then he started hearing the shots just one after another in this volley.
And you mentioned those shots. Brett Connolly, we just got the video in from one of our viewers who was actually across the street at the club when those shots first started firing. If you could just run us through what we've just seen.
All right, guys, we want to get to that. Again, those shots coming out between 2 and 3 this morning. This is a WESH 2 exclusive of that video of shots being fired. Let's take a listen. This is the first time we're going to get our opportunity to see those shots outside of Pulse nightclub when those shooters started shooting and then running inside to the nightclub. Let's take a listen.
Oh, my God. People are getting shot, dude.
Get out of here.
Oh, my God, dude.
Firing off shots.
People are getting shot, dude. Oh,
you can hear the chaotic scene outside of Pulse nightclub when those shots are fired again between 2 and 3 this morning. We understand those shooters drove up, started firing, going inside into the club, and now we are seeing so many of those victims being brought to the hospital. It's unclear where those shooters are right now. We understand they were inside of the club. Police had a crisis negotiator out on the scene, and as that is going on, we're seeing more and more victims from this shooting being brought to the hospital. Let's go back out live now to Stuart Moore and Bob Keeling. They're live outside of ORMC, where so many of those patients, in fact, all of those patients were brought here this morning. Some of those patients being brought in police cars because they did not have enough ambulances to bring all of those victims to the hospital. And we might start seeing more patients show up to the hospital because we understand that some of them were still inside of the club as those gunmen were inside as well. That's when police showed up. The bomb squad was outside of that area. Let's go back out to Stuart now, because Stuart, that video that we just watched, where that viewer is seeing those shots being fired, clearly disturbed, that chaotic scene. What did that witness tell you about being outside of the nightclub?
Well, Brett, that witness actually told me they saw a vehicle pull up, and that's when they first started to hear those shots, and that vehicle was left in the middle of the road, and they saw someone running towards the nightclub. Now, obviously, that's unconfirmed at this point. That person says they hightailed out of there after they shot that video. But it's potentially that they believe, at least that witness believes, that that was the shooter who was actually running towards the nightclub after first firing those shots. But again, Kirby, if you could just zoom in and we can see it, where the setup for more potential victims is already ready from these folks here at ORMC. They are preparing Bob for more victims to come to this location.
And there's so much question still, Stuart, at this point about where the shooter or shooters are. It was quite a scene watching a police officer in military garb with the weapon at his side, with a tracking dog going up, literally looking on top of the bus, platform there, as well as under cars. I mean, so obviously they are still intently looking for someone.
It's a scary situation, because at this point they do believe that there could be possible devices out there. I know our Michelle Meredith has been working other angles as well, where she is trying to actually get a hold of some witnesses who may have actually seen what happened, who were actually inside of that nightclub. She's been able to speak to several of them. And Michelle, let's go to you now, because you have one of those witnesses with you at this point. What are you learning at this point?
Well, I have another witness who was inside the club when this happened. Sir,
I was hanging out all the way in the back, and then I went to the bathroom. When I come out, I see the guy boom, boom, and shooting like crazy. Shoot everybody else, because when we come up to the bathroom, and we were running outside like crazy. Everybody was running.
what could you see?
I see the guy shooting, and then I got my brother, and my brother's still over there. I tried to look for him, but I cannot go all the way down there.
Are you missing any of your friends?
Yeah, my brother, I think they got him on the other side. And my friend, they said they shoot my nephew in the head and my friend on the back, and that's what I want to find out.
You were hearing that your nephew was shot in the head?
My nephew was shot in the head.
Who are you hearing this from?
My brother called me on the other side. My brother called me.
Is your brother still in the club?
No, they said the police got him. They're going to take him to the house, because we cannot move the car from there, because my guy left to the club.
Describe the chaos you saw.
The chaos, the guy went crazy, shooting like at least 40 shots. There was more than one in there, more than one. I shit went crazy there. I came out running. Even when I came outside, my blood is full of blood. My shirt.
All right, sir. I'm going to turn it back over to Stuart. Thank you, sir.
Michelle, we actually see a patient who's just been brought in. This person is actually moving on the gurney. And they look a lot more alert than some of the other patients that have been brought in at this point. We're actually hearing, you can't hear this on camera, but some screams coming from that person. But at least the screams indicate that this person is alive. It's just a caravan of emergency vehicles that have been bringing in more and more of the wounded to this location at ORMC. And again, the location of ORMC versus the actual crime scene, Pulse nightclub, where the shooting took place, is only about a block and a half away, or 2 blocks, less than a mile for sure. So a lot of people are being brought here just because, one, is the closest hospital system, and because of the lack of just the number of ambulances. We've seen, since we've been here in the past 10 minutes, at least 6 different vehicles that have brought multiple patients in, Bob.
And of course, that police pickup truck, yelling for people to get out of the way, the urgency of bringing them here. I also think it bears repeating, Stuart, that as folks are getting out this Sunday morning to stay away from this area of Orange Avenue. Anywhere from ORMC all the way down to Michigan is just a locked, tight, secure perimeter as police and sheriff's detectives from several different agencies continue to sort out this situation. So, again, folks, if you don't have to be in this area, there are even people who live along Orange Avenue who've told me they're not able to get back to their homes, as well as the folks here at the hospital who are waiting for some word on folks who've been injured, friends of friends, children. So, Stuart, as I throw it back to you again, folks need to steer clear of this area because this is one of the largest police presence I've ever seen down here.
Yeah, and we want to update people again, just because give a timeline of exactly what happened. This all began around 2 a.m. this morning at Pulse Nightclub, which is just on South Orange Avenue, just south of ORMC Hospital in downtown Orlando. That's when a report came out that multiple people were shot by a gunman who entered the Pulse Nightclub. Now, witnesses first described hearing a first burst of gunshots, at which point they at one point even thought that it may have been a joke. Then a second volley of gunshots started when people started to stand up, and that's when they realized the horror that they were experiencing. Now, people have described to us of crawling out of this location. One witness told me that they actually had a friend who was locked in one of the bathrooms at that location, had been wounded in the arm, and had been there for more than 2 hours, still waiting for emergency vehicles. And as we speak, another vehicle comes from that location, from that area, screaming back from the Pulse Nightclub, pulling in, as you can see, more and more doctors in the ER getting ready to receive yet another patient. So this counts to about 6 or 7 different vehicles that we have seen just in the past few moments. That does not include the people that we saw who were able to escape the nightclub before this hostage situation began. Now, we have still not learned from Orlando police or other investigators about any situation that's going on inside. And guys, could you just repeat that one more time? Do we have the video of the person who actually... Yeah, let's hear these gunshots when they first originally started. Again, we actually spoke to a witness who says that they saw a vehicle pull up, they started recording their phone, and that's when gunshots began. Take a listen.
Oh my God, people are getting shot, dude.
Get out of here.
Oh my God, dude.
This guy's firing off shots.
I'm gonna get a hard wire.
Those videos again of the gunshots that we've been hearing from this location, from some of the witnesses that were actually involved with this. Now, one thing that we have learned from witnesses, Bob, is that so many people have stuck around this area because they believe or they haven't heard from their loved ones who were inside. Either they're with them or they rushed to this area after they heard the shooting happen.
Well, that's right. You have people who are still inside the club that we understand police are wanting to interview to find out their witness account of what happened. Then you have folks here on the sidewalk where we're standing right outside the emergency room, desperate to find out information about loved ones. And what's also going on, I was just having a conversation with a woman who's, is it your child? Is your son? I believe, yeah, and she was just telling us, you know, at this point, just what is your sense of where you are on this right now?
I just feel terrible. I don't know where my son is. I haven't been able to get a hold of him. I know that he was sitting next to his boyfriend, and his boyfriend was taken by ambulance with multiple gunshots. And we can't get a hold of him, so he was sitting right next to his boyfriend who's in here getting treated.
Have you had any communication with them at all? Any text messages, anything?
None at all. He went there with 2 other men and 2 other friends, and those 2 friends happened to be in the bathroom, and when the shooting happened, and they were able to run out at the time the shooting happened. But Juan is in here, shot, and my son is unaccounted for right now. So I don't know if he's still in the club, if he's dead, if he's shot in here. Just hope he's okay.
We do too. We absolutely
I know you do.
Too. And we know that you're not alone in your sense of not knowing what's going on. Did your son go to this nightclub a lot? Did he frequent it quite a bit?
Yeah, he's single. Well, he's dating a young man, but they're single men. They don't have any kids. They both work, and they enjoy going to clubs on the weekend. So,
and what I understand from
lives in
tonight is the
downtown.
witnesses were saying that it was a very peaceful atmosphere at the time all of this started. I mean, had he given you the sense that this was a place he went a lot and enjoyed going?
Yeah, he lives in downtown Orlando. They go to all the places in downtown Orlando. They love Orlando. And he went to UCF as an undergrad and a grad student, so he's been in Orlando since 2003. And then after he became employed, he wanted to stay in Orlando. So he does go to, the clubs. He was just at SeaWorld. I just talked to him at 6 o'clock.
Well, we're going to stand right by here with you as we try to get more information about what's happened to your son
Yeah.
as well as the other victims.
Yeah,
and
and
again,
if
we,
you can
we
find-
wish you all the best, and the minute we find out, we're going to share that
And
with
I'm
you as
listening
well.
to you too because I'm listening to you guys too because you guys can get information and you'll let us know. Like
Sure
if
will.
there's how many fatalities, when you're letting the public know, then we'll know and nobody else is telling us.
Right.
So you're gonna find out who's shot, how many fatalities and how many they have here or if they go to other hospitals. So I know you guys are doing a good job. So thank you, and I'm going to stay by you guys too so I can hear what the updates are.
We're just so sorry for the fact that you're having to go through this, and I mean, we're seeing more and more patients coming in.
Which is good.
Which some, I mean, are voicing. We can hear this one patient who's being taken in right now. So, I mean, to know that there are several people who are alive, we're going to continue to pray that your son is among them that does come out of this building. Earlier, we did hear a loud explosion at our post here at ORMC from that scene, which is just less than a mile away, and that was at Pulse. Let's take a listen as we were doing that earlier live report at the moment that they detonated a device. This was a device that was exploded by OPD. Gunshots. He says several other people are also inside of that restroom with them. And just on live TV, I'm not sure if you guys were able to hear that back at the station. And Pete, we can point that direction. And I'm having some issues potentially maybe hearing that. But we did have that earlier that happened today when that explosion actually happened while we were on live TV just up the road from us. But again, we can still see more hospital beds, gurneys that are out here preparing potential more victims that are coming to this location because they believe that more potential victims could be coming out of that nightclub tonight or this morning. So again, just give you a timeline, at 2 a.m. is when this all first began. That's when we were told by several different investigators of a shooting that happened inside of the nightclub. That's when several emergency vehicles rushed to this area. The road leading up to Pulse nightclub is still blocked off at this point. We do not know whether or not that shooter has been detained, has been taken out by police, or the status of that person at this point, or if there were possibly multiple shooters at this point. We don't know that information. Orlando police have not updated us. And Bob, it's one of the most important facets of this entire story. Because we're seeing victims come, it leads you to believe they're at least making entrance to get some of those people out.
Absolutely. And Stuart, one of the witnesses I spoke with seemed sure that there were actually two people who were shooting. And just given the sense of the searching that's going on here with the tracking dogs, with the armed officers, they are very intently looking for something. So you had mentioned something earlier as well about some sort of perhaps bomb type vest or bomb device. What did you hear about that?
Well, I actually heard from one of my sources with law enforcement here locally that one of the people who was actually shooting inside the club when they first took hostages and was negotiating with the hostage negotiator, that this person was wearing a vest that police believed was a bomb, and they relayed to police that they were actually wearing a bomb. Now, obviously, these are unconfirmed reports from officials who were at this scene. This is from a law enforcement source who told me that this was possibly the case. That's when we started to see the Orange County Bomb Squad actually came to this location to help out with this investigation. We also saw the bomb dogs that were searching the different vehicles throughout the parking lot here at ORMC, and we saw a specialist who was dressed in a bomb suit also walking around with that dog to ensure that no explosive devices were found. That's when we heard that explosion earlier. Potentially the device was found. It could have been harmless, but OPD did decide to explode that device here just a block away from us. As we zoom out again, it looks like they're bringing more gurneys out here at the emergency room, potentially preparing for more victims to come to this location. Several doctors are also still walking out as well. One of the biggest issues that's also going on out here is people have gathered at this location because they are uncertain whether or not their loved ones were injured, whether or not they're alive, whether or not they're in the hospital, whether or not they're still locked in there. A lot of people have not been able to get in contact with their loved ones at this point, and that's one of the most scary things that is happening here at this location. A lot of these police officers have been forced to answer questions that they just simply don't know the answer to. So, Brett, this is a developing story, and it continues to change as we stand out here.
Yeah, if you're just joining us on a Sunday morning, a chaotic scene in downtown Orlando right now. Shooting victims being brought to ORMC, where Stuart Moore and Bob Keeling are standing outside of right now. First responders covering that area, as well as a large police presence, law enforcement all around that downtown area, really from ORMC down to Michigan. A lot of those streets are currently blocked off this morning after a shooting at Pulse nightclub between 2 and 3 this morning. Stuart, I know that you don't have the answers to all of these questions right now, but I just want to bring you back out to the nightclub. Again, it's on the corner of Orange and Cayley Avenue. These shooters start firing outside the club, enter into the club. Heard from so many witnesses this morning, those shooters start firing in that club. From that point on, obviously people scatter outside. They scatter to find shelter, to find police presence outside of there. We understand that the shooters were then stayed inside that club. We don't know about the potential of hostages. We do know that a crisis negotiator was brought out by law enforcement to the club. Do we have a sense of where police are with those shooter or shooters inside of the club, or where that crisis negotiator is with that shooter, and whether or not there are hostages or people that have been hit by gunfire that are still inside that club that obviously need some medical treatment? Do we have a sense of what is going on inside Pulse nightclub 3.5 hours after those shots were first fired?
The best information that we've been able to receive from inside the Pulse nightclub is from a witness who actually has one of his friends who's locked in the bathroom at Pulse nightclub. Not sure if that person was among the people who was brought into this location. That witness is a little bit further down from where we are actually standing right now. But we were told that the bathroom door was locked and that several people inside of the bathroom were injured. Several people also had already passed away. And several people were wounded and just waiting to find their way out. They were waiting for police. This was around 4 o'clock this morning when they first spoke to this witness, and they were trying to get their way out of the nightclub, waiting for police to come and rescue them. And at that point, they said that they were very fearful that they would possibly die while waiting. Now, we have not learned of any information as to whether or not police have been able to get those shooters out of that nightclub. That's still part of the developing story.
Okay, we've had this up on the screen for a while. You're seeing the multiple injuries. That's because at this point in time, we don't have a specific number or the extent of all those injuries. But Stuart, since you've been at the hospital, we've seen them prepare more gurneys outside. We've seen them bring patients in that you've described in very, very serious condition. Do we have a sense of how many patients have been brought to the hospital at this point in time? Because we've seen those gurneys. We've also seen police bring patients to the hospital because they did not have enough ambulances to bring them out there.
Brett, that's exactly right. And just from my viewpoint, I can see at least 7 beds that are waiting for more potential patients, and you can see the pile of doctors who are also right there waiting for more patients to come from that location. So we don't know exact numbers. My law enforcement source told me this morning that 20 people were involved with this, but we don't have an exact number as to how many potential people were shot. Westview's Bob Keeling is also following this story. He's got a witness who was actually at that club when all this happened. Bob, do they have anyone that they know that's still inside or unaccounted for at this moment?
Yeah. Fortunately, Chris Swain is here with us, and Chris, it was actually his friend who was inside. You had said your friend was part of the lighting at the time?
He controls all the lighting for the club, and so where he was is he was on the balcony above the dance floor, controlling all the lighting when it happened.
What did he say? Was
he didn't really see much because he's post-military, so the minute he heard the gunshots, he said he hit the ground and dove under the lighting table. But he said, once it stopped enough that some of the staff could get up and start to leave, and people were trying to leave. He said there were bodies on the ground. Don't know whether or not they're dead or alive. I know there's 7 confirmed dead, probably more injured. But most of the staff was able to get out through the back.
Yeah, I'm not sure of that number of deceased. I don't know if we've gotten that from Orlando police, but we certainly do know that a lot of people were shot, a lot of people injured. Did he give you any sense of the gunman or gunmen who were involved?
Like I said, he didn't see anything. He's post-military, so the minute he heard those bullets, it was down.
Now, you said after all of this happened, he was having to stay in the perimeter. Tell me about that and what his status is now.
Okay, after they got most of the staff members out of the club, they brought him to the 7-Eleven down the street, and the cops were checking their IDs, making sure they were who they were. just getting statements and everything. And then from what I've been told from him right now, they're still at 7-Eleven while they're searching for a gunman. But once they get the clear, they're going to get put on a Lynx bus and then brought over here to get dropped off.
So what's going through your mind when you hear that this has gone on and your friend's involved in this and had a very close call? What's your reaction to all of it?
Honestly, terrified, because I go to school for this, and it's like I was going to start working here when I graduated in a couple of months. But it's like I work in all the clubs in Orlando, so it's unfortunate that this happened, but you can't let it deter you from living your life. But I'm shocked and appalled that this would happen. Just this weekend too, in general, with Plaza and this, it's devastating. I don't think anything like this has happened in Orlando in a while. So.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, thanks so much for sharing your story. And Brett, we're hearing story after story after story with folks just waiting on friends, waiting on family. Taking a look here at the emergency room again, you can still see the medical staff outside the emergency room, obviously waiting on more arrivals. And I want to make an important point here. Orlando police at this point have been communicating with us, with the media, via Twitter. And so we're waiting to get updated and official information from them. And we don't have anything on officially how many casualties they may be dealing with, how many people may be deceased. At this point, we don't have any official information on that. So we're having to rely on these eyewitnesses, on these family members. And I believe Michelle Meredith has another story along those lines. Michelle?
Stand by, stand by.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Hello, we're here. Your name, please.
Helene Royster. My son Sean was at the club. He was sitting out on the patio, and he heard several pops, and he heard people say run, so he jumped over the wall across the street, so he didn't get injured, but the friend that brought him, he's been shot 3 times. We don't know what his condition is. There was another one of their friends. We haven't found him yet. And my son is he's just devastated. He's just devastated. He called me 2:30 this morning, and I didn't know what had happened, so my husband and I just rushed down to, try to get to him, and they have him secluded, so we can't get to him right now.
So he's still in the club?
He's outside the club. He was on the patio, so he was able to jump over the wall and run across to a convenience store.
And his friends who are injured, where are they?
One is in the hospital. The other one we can't find. We don't know where he is.
Just your thoughts right now.
It's just unspeakable. You just don't expect your child to be involved with something like this. And, we're just hoping for the best for the other individuals who have children that have been injured or loved ones.
Well, I thank you very much, Helene, for talking to us. And there are people waiting to hear from loved ones, waiting to find out what happened. Some of them are in this corner, very close to where the scene is blocked. Many of them are down here. And you, by the hospital, watching people being brought in, and there's a lot of anxiety, as you can imagine. Stuart, what do you have going on?
All right, so we are back here live where I'm having a couple of different issues getting my cords and cables going on, but we just learned from Orlando police that the shooter in this situation has died. So the shooter has died. That was the most important thing to get this entire issue resolved. We have now learned that the shooter in this situation is dead. Orlando police tweeting that just a short time ago. We do not know the circumstances and how that shooter died, whether or not that person took their own life or whether or not he was taken down by SWAT team members who responded to this scene. But you can still see several different gurneys and doctors are lined up. We've not seen an emergency vehicle bring any more victims to this location, at least for the past few minutes. But this is still a very fluid situation where family members of all the people unaccounted for are people that are already in the hospital have been out here all morning long. Again, Brett, I want to toss it back to you in the studio, but this all began around just shortly after 2 a.m. this morning when all this started to happen, and we have just learned that the shooter in the situation is now dead.
All right, Stuart, thank you. As you mentioned, it's unclear if that shooter was killed by police or by some other means. But we do want to let you know also Orlando police tweeting out that this is a mass casualty situation. In terms of numbers, we don't have that confirmed just yet. But the way that Orlando Police Department is characterizing this and calling this shooting from overnight between 2 and 3 in the morning at Pulse nightclub in downtown Orlando, it is a mass casualty shooting. And I want to, you're taking a look at live shots down there right now, but we have some video from earlier in the night. And this is a victim being carried by, looks like a first responder and maybe just 2 other people that were in and around that area. But you can see a combination of law enforcement, first responders, Good Samaritans, people that can jump in. This police car right here stopping to get that person loaded up. And the reason for that, again, so many first responding vehicles in that area, whether it be an ambulance, a police car, this pickup truck that is unmarked, clearly a law enforcement vehicle, taking patients to the hospital. That gives you an indication of how many people were hit by gunfire between 2 and 3 this morning in downtown Orlando in this nightclub shooting. And just moments ago, we learned that the shooter was killed inside of the club. We don't know if that was by police or they might have taken their own life. We don't have that information as of right now. We just know that shooter was killed inside the club. But want to head back out live to Michelle Meredith. She has been speaking to witnesses all morning long who have been sharing incredibly emotional and personal accounts over what has gone on in the last couple of hours. And many of those, Michelle, now are family victims, family members of those victims that were hit by gunfire. Who do you have with you this morning?
Well, I'm talking again to Helene. And Helene, I just told you that Orlando police are telling us the shooter is dead. Your thoughts?
I don't wish bad on anybody, but at least I know that no one else will be hurt. We don't even know how many people are injured, dead, whatever, but maybe they can find out what the motive was behind, the shootings.
You said your son has a friend who's still there. Does that bring you some hope this might be resolved?
Yes, it does. One is in the hospital. The other one, Shane, he hasn't located yet, but we're thinking that he may still be in the club. So hopefully he's not injured. I don't want to sound selfish, but I'm just happy that my son was not hurt. But my heart goes out to the other families who are mourning their losses and just keeping them in our prayers.
Helene, you were telling me you're just appalled at the level of violence we've seen here lately.
Yes, it's increasing. There's reasons for that, but unfortunately, I was talking to another young lady, and people seem to be on edge. They're very angry, as if they just walk around with a chip on their shoulder. And you just hope the violence stops eventually.
Well, thank you very much, Helene, for talking to us again. As mentioned, Orlando police are telling us that the shooter is dead. They did say shooter. Helene asked me, is he inside, is he outside, or the circumstances? We do not know at this point, but we are waiting for Orlando police to fill us in. Live in Orlando, Michelle Meredith, WESH 2 News.
Okay, Michelle, thank you. And just to reset the scene for many of you that might be waking up on this Sunday morning and joining us for the first time, we have a mass casualty situation in downtown Orlando. That's how it's been described by the Orlando Police Department. This is at Pulse nightclub on the corner near Orange and Cayley Avenues. Much of that area still shut down. Much of that area still an active scene, and more victims hours after this shooting are still being brought to the hospital. Shots were fired between 2 and 3 this morning. We understand the shooter originally started firing outside, then goes inside of the nightclub. We do not have a specific number on how many people were killed, how many people were injured, how many people were brought to the hospital. But it has been a couple of hours since that shooting occurred earlier this morning. That shooter has been killed on the inside. We don't know, on the inside of the nightclub, we don't know if that was by police or another way. But we want to go back out live now to Stuart Moore. He's been outside of both the area surrounding the nightclub, as close as you can get, because you understand that area is still blocked off right now. He's also been outside of ORMC, where all of those patients have been taken. And Stuart, you can get us up to speed on what you've seen there. But one thing that we've noticed here, since you've been outside of that hospital, is that hours after this shooting, people are still showing up at the hospital. And we understood from earlier that that crisis negotiator was outside of the nightclub. That shooter was dead now, but thought to be still inside. Is it possible that there were more patients inside of the nightclub that were injured and were stuck in there for hours and are now only now being able to get medical attention at the hospital from what you're seeing?
Brett, it's definitely quite possible. And in fact, at least we know from one witness who's had a friend that was locked in the bathroom that was wounded. That person did have to wait for several hours just to be rescued from that location. Again, the most important thing that we can report at this point, we're seeing airport K-9s that are leaving this area. Obviously, they specialize in bomb sniffing. But the most important thing to update you all on is what you just said, is the fact that the shooter is believed dead at this point, reported by Orlando police. That means they have been able to go into Pulse nightclub and get those people out who potentially been waiting for hours for rescue. Now, we actually spoke to a person who actually saw that person who ran into the building they believe was the shooter, and they actually heard some of those gunshots when they first started. It's a big burst. It lasted just about 10 seconds, and you can hear about 25 different shots. According to witnesses who were inside of the nightclub, they said that that exactly happened. A big burst at first, things calmed down, and then that's when the next burst began. So take a listen to this video.
Oh my God, dude.
Firing off shots.
Oh my God. People are getting shot, dude. Oh my God.
And again, that's just the account from one of the witnesses. That's before police were actually able to arrive at this scene. Now, we do not know whether or not that shooter was killed within an hour at that point, but we do know that several people who were being potentially held hostage in that location were unable to leave until just about within the past 30 minutes when Orlando police announced that that shooter was dead. And that's when we saw the tremendous amount of activity of patients being brought to the hospital. Now, we have not seen any emergency vehicles screaming down this location. That can mean one of two things: that there are no more injured inside the club, or at this point that they are starting to actually go through and count the casualties of the people that are in there. You would think that the people that were in the most danger or part of their life would be rushed to this hospital location first. We're starting to see some of the other agencies that assisted with this investigation also depart from this scene as well. Earlier today, we also heard a disturbing sound when we were doing our first live report, Brett, as you know, at the top of the 5 o'clock half hour, when police detonated what they believe could have potentially been a dangerous device. If we had that sound, we were on live TV when that bomb blast went off. Take a listen. Gunshots. He says several other people are also inside of that restroom with him. And just on live TV, I'm not sure if you guys were able to hear that back at the station. And Pete, we can point that direction, but we just heard a loud explosion that just happened coming from that direction. Now we haven't. And again, that was just earlier today when we were a little bit closer towards Pulse nightclub. We are now at ORMC, which is under a mile away, even under a half a mile away from Pulse nightclub, which is just south of this location. Police still have a heavy presence here at the hospital, also a little bit further down as well. We've seen them walking around with military-style guns, searching different vehicles to make sure that there were no bomb devices here. Kirby, if we could just turn just a little bit, and as you mentioned, Brett, there are still several people who are out here hugging each other at this location, talking with our reporter Bob Keeling. We have learned that some of the people actually say that one witness who was inside of the nightclub waiting for rescue actually had a picture of the gunman dead and had that on their phone. They were quickly taken away by police to do a decompressing interview to talk about that location. That person has not come back but several people still uncertain as to the status of their loved ones as they wait out here at the hospital to find out the latest on their people that are involved. It's been a very restless night here in Orlando. This happened around 2 a.m. this morning. The sun is starting to come up now, Brett, but still plenty of questions that remain unanswered at this hour.
Yes, Stuart, you were giving indication of how close that is. It is very close, about a quarter mile from the hospital to the nightclub, and still patients showing up. So certainly a lot of people brought there right after that shooting, but clearly for a couple hours it took some time to get those patients over, presumably because they were still stuck inside that nightclub when police believe the shooter, who is now dead, was also inside that nightclub. I want to get back over to Michelle Meredith. She's also live in downtown Orlando right now. Still a very active scene, as you can see from all of those lights in the background there at the hospital, also near the nightclub, and that area is still blocked off. Michelle, you have spoken to some witnesses this morning, sharing their personal accounts, both that have been inside this club when shots were fired and those that have showed up to the hospital to find out if their loved ones have been injured in this, and if so, the extent of those injuries. Let's go back out to you to find out who you're speaking with this morning.
Well, this man has a very unusual perspective. He was inside the hospital when the victims started coming in. And sir, what's your name?
My name is Trevine Scott.
And what did you see inside the hospital?
Ma'am, it was like chaos inside of there. I came in early Saturday morning for like dizziness, and they wanted to keep me for observation. So last night sometime around, I think around 10 something, they took me to do an MRI. And shortly after, we was coming down the hall, and it was like chaos, man, really chaos. I saw people, it was bringing people in on stretchers. A lot of them had the sheets pulled over their face, but you could tell, I saw one guy, he was laying there and like blood was just pouring from the back of his head. And like 3 or 4 times we went on what they call a code silver, to where they thought the active shooter was inside the hospital. And they had us locked in different rooms. It was really crazy. I've never been around something, and I'm still not discharged yet. But I was able to come outside to go to my car, but now my car is inside what they call the perimeter zone, so I can't move my car. And the guy said I probably won't be able to move my car all day.
What were you thinking when you were inside?
Man, I was wondering what was going on. I heard over the thing that they had massive trauma victims coming in, but I had no idea what to expect. But like I said, I was right there in the hallway when they started bringing people in, and it was really ugly. It was really ugly, man.
What were people saying?
People were saying, oh, that some shooter had shot up a club, a nightclub, and it was still people stuck down there held hostage. So I can say, man, I'm really so nerve-wracking right now. It's really, because I saw some stuff in there last night that I've never seen in my life. I've never seen that before. But it was really, really chaos inside the hospital, especially when they went and called this code silver. They had one guy that came out running on crutches or something. No, he was hopping, and that's when they hollered for the code silver. But then you saw the cops in there with the guns, and they was running behind. It was crazy. I don't know who this guy was or whatever, but it was chaos inside the hospital, man. Really chaos. Blood everywhere. Blood all up and down the hallways.
You said police were running after someone?
Yes, it was a guy that I saw. He came like hopping by. A black guy came hopping by. I'm sorry to say black guy, but a guy came hopping by, and shortly after that, several of the hospital staff was like chasing him, or some of them were even in front of him, and then others came chasing him. Shortly after that, you saw the police come, and they was like everywhere. Like I said, they went to 3 or 4 different code silvers in there, where each time we had to go to different rooms to be locked in.
What were they saying to the man they were chasing?
Ma'am, I have no idea. All I know, like I said, I saw him just run by. He was hopping, and I didn't hear what they were saying to him, but that's what I witnessed, though.
Well, thank you very much, sir, for your very unusual perspective. And this is the first time we've been able to talk to someone who was inside the hospital when they started bringing patients in. And as you can see, the perimeter is still here. They've got even more police on the scene. We have victims, I should say people who are waiting to hear about their loved ones, their status. They stand on all the corners. They're very worried. And Stu, what do you have for us right now?
All right, Michelle, I will take it back here in the studio from here. We're nearing 4 hours since shots were fired in downtown Orlando. inside and outside of Pulse nightclub. You heard that gentleman describe the chaos inside the hospital as patients started arriving. He didn't know it at the time. We didn't know it at the time, but we found out just a little bit ago. This is a mass casualty situation, and the Orlando Police Department has been updating so much of what's going on Twitter. Want to show you the tweet that they have posted this morning. Pulse shooting. The shooter inside the club is dead. So if you're just joining us here Sunday morning, a shooter between 2 and 3 this morning showing up at that nightclub, firing shots outside, inside, then goes inside the club, starts firing his gun. We had a crisis negotiator that was brought out to the club. Witnesses, unconfirmed reports, but witnesses saying that descriptions of a bomb or someone had a bomb in there. We did hear a controlled detonation at 5 o'clock this morning, but we don't have the specifics surrounding what device might have been destroyed or if there was, in fact, a device in that area. The patients are being brought to ORMC this morning. Outside of being called a mass casualty, we don't have specific numbers on how many of those have been injured or killed in this situation. But Bob Keeling has been outside of ORMC for hours now as the scene there continues to grow. Bob, more and more people continue to show up, whether they've got family members that were hit in this gunfire, they are patients themselves. We've seen many patients being brought to that hospital since you've been out there this morning. You've been speaking to some witnesses. What else have you learned this morning?
Well, Brett, you're absolutely right in terms of story after story after story, person after person, as the sun rises on a beautiful Sunday morning, living this nightmare from this shooting. One of them now is with me, Rosalia Ramos. Now, Mrs. Ramos, you said your son was struck.
Yeah, I was in my house and to sleep. And then I received a call that my son get shot. And
Who called you?
A girlfriend of my son, and she said that my son get shot, and she was crying, all that stuff, and a lot of crazy stuff happened over there. And then I run over here. When I get here, I try to get to the club. The place that happened, and then you know, that part was closed, those streets. Some of the police, they sent me. I'm asking where the ORMC. They sent me over here, and they told me, you know, they sent me to another street. When I get here, they not allow me to enter to the hospital.
Have you gotten any sense of your son's wounds or how?
No, nothing. And then I called in a few minutes ago, I called to the hospital. They told me they don't have any the list of all the people that they have in this hospital, and some of the people they transferred to another hospital because this hospital is full. And then, you know, I keep contact with the person that she had my son's telephone, you know, the cell phone.
Yes.
And the key of my son's car. She told me that he get shot. My son get shot 3 times. Yeah, I don't know how he's doing. I don't know nothing. I'm worried because she a few minutes ago, she told my son, my another son, that he had a big hole in the stomach. He had a shot in the chest, and he had another shot over here near the stomach. So I don't know how my son is doing. I'm trying to be in contact with, you know, my son's father's side because he is in Puerto Rico. Now, I don't know, I'm waiting from 2 o'clock, and this happened, you know, the situation happened. The girl who was in contact with me, right. She said 2 men was in the door. They started to shoot.
So she saw around, 2 people shooting?
Yeah, 2 people was shooting everybody like crazy. My son tried to escape or something like that. And when that happened, they shot my son 3 times. But they shot him like crazy. some of the people was in the bathroom, like his friend. You know,
Hiding?
Yeah. She was over there. She just get out, after they was safe. After that, when I was over here waiting and waiting, I hear a shot in this area in front of the hospital. Or I don't know, maybe inside of the hospital, because I hear that somebody tried to shot people in the hospital. Also, I hear a shot in this side, in the back of the hospital, and the police, they try to control the situation.
Well, Mrs. Ramos,
I'm still waiting.
Still waiting.
I called to Massachusetts to be in contact with the family.
Well, we're certainly hoping for the best for you and for your son and for your family.
And then I called I'm working with that office. I call her that maybe Monday I can be working because of the situation. I don't know if my son is going to be in life.
Well, as I said, we certainly wish the best for him. And Mrs. Ramos' story is very typical out here. It's been hours of folks here on the sidewalk waiting for any news. And Brett, I think this is an interesting point. We're hearing from multiple witnesses that there were multiple gunmen. The breaking news we've had in the last 10 or 15 minutes is that the shooter inside the nightclub is now dead, but there is still a significant question as to whether someone else may have gotten out or not. We are waiting to hear that from the Orlando Police Department, who up till now have been communicating via Twitter, and there's no word about that, but we've seen a significant presence of law enforcement, military gear, armed with tracking dogs going all around this area. So it still remains to be seen whether or not this was the work of just one shooter or more, and if what the motive was. That's another thing that people are talking about. Why would someone do something this crazy? And I think we have some more of this eyewitness sound from some of the folks who are in or around the club. Let's see if we can take a listen to that.
We heard gunshots. They said that they were actually like, it was just like a joke, which technically it wasn't. Everybody was on the floor. They went up again. They were about to leave, but then the gunshot came again. We scrawled all the way down to we were crawling in the club or whatnot. That's pretty much it. We have still friends in there. We actually have two friends in there. One has a wounded on his leg, and then the other one on the arm.
You've heard from both of them, though?
One of them, the one with the hand wounded, he feels like he's gonna die in there.
How lucky do you feel to be alive?
Oh, I feel lucky to be with you.
And that also is a common refrain we're hearing from people who just happened to be out of harm's way at the time. One man telling us his friend was working on the lighting platform. He's ex-military, and the minute he heard the shots, he hit the deck and crawled to safety. You know, that's a story we've heard many times as well. So at this point, they are waiting, they are watching. The situation here, while it's a bit more calm, there are still folks mighty stressed out trying to find out the fate of friends and loved ones, as we're still trying to find out whether this was one shooter, perhaps more, and what the motive was. And we'll continue to dig for that information. So let's send it back to you in the studio.
Yeah, Bob, we were thinking that exact same thing the last couple hours when you have been speaking to witnesses out there. It's always been described as multiple shooters. So a good point to bring up. And we don't have any information on that shooter that is confirmed dead by the Orlando Police Department inside Pulse nightclub. Clearly, at this point in time, do not have any idea on a motive. Much of the attention, in fact, all the attention right now on so many of those patients that have been brought to the hospital early on when those shots were first fired overnight, and then hours later, some of them finally getting attention. You're taking a look, live shot now of Chopper 2 over that Pulse nightclub near the intersection of Orange and Cayley Avenue in downtown Orlando. You can see that area, that street just covered with police cars. No one allowed inside or outside that crime scene right now. So if you're just waking up this morning, you know, law enforcement, heavy presence downtown. A lot of streets in downtown Orlando are blocked off right now. First responders still getting to some of those patients after a shooter opened fire outside of the Pulse nightclub and then going inside of Pulse nightclub. And you've heard Bob Keeling talking this morning how confirmation on that shooter is dead. Only question that we certainly want to continue to follow up on is from some witnesses that we've spoken to inside. There were multiple shooters, so we are trying to get confirmation after that one shooter is confirmed dead if in fact there was another individual that was firing outside there this morning. In just a little bit, we understand that the Orlando Police Department, because there are so many witnesses in this mass casualty situation, they are going to be busing those witnesses over to their headquarters so they can begin the process of talking to all of these people on the record to find out specifically what went on minute by minute from all of these accounts. So again, a live look over the huge crime scene in Pulse nightclub in downtown Orlando. And this is what we saw so much of overnight. So many patients being loaded into not only ambulances, but pickup trucks, unmarked police vehicles that were bringing patients to the hospital because there were so many. You're taking a look at a woman here, clearly in pain, getting loaded onto that ambulance, and all of them being brought just a quarter a mile away to ORMC. That's where Stuart Moore is live for us this morning. He's been out there for a couple hours. And Stuart, as you've noticed, as we've mentioned this morning, so many patients were brought there quickly after the nightclub shooting. So many were brought there hours later because we understand that many were still inside wounded in that nightclub when police showed up. And with that shooter still inside, it was clearly very difficult for police and law enforcement and first responders to get access inside that club to then start giving some of those patients treatment. You're back outside ORMC this morning, obviously still an active scene. Much of that area continues to be blocked off this morning. What can you tell us as so many more patients and then family members of those loved ones who are still trying to find out what happened and if in fact their loved ones have been injured in the extent? What are you seeing out there now this morning as we approach about 4 hours after shots were fired?
Well, Brett, we just saw a woman who was looking for her daughter earlier. She said that her daughter was shot, according to several of her friends. And at one point, they feared that she was still stuck inside. But now they have learned that she has been brought. She was one of those people who came. And that second swath of people, when they finally knew that the shooter was dead, she came to the hospital at that point. She did not want to talk to us on camera, but she did tell us that her daughter is inside. She did not know her status. Right now, we're seeing that bus that you mentioned a short while ago. It's just behind this live truck. It just stopped. But it will be the bus that's actually going to, and as soon as on cue, is driving now. But it's going to be the bus that's going to pick up those witnesses and take them to Orlando Police so that they can begin those interviews. Now, also a short while ago, we did see a hostage negotiator walk down the street from Pulse nightclub, which, as we've mentioned before, is less than a half a mile up the road, and actually walk back into this hospital to probably visit with some of the people that he helped get out of that location. Now, at this point, we have not learned of the exact count of people that have possibly been injured. Witnesses who were inside tell us there was up to 40 people that they saw that were injured that were actually inside of that nightclub. When we were standing here, once the shooter was dead and we saw people being rushed to this location via pickup truck, also via ambulance, we saw about 6 to 7 different patients who were brought to this scene. That's nowhere near the amount of people that have been reporting that have been inside of that location as well. One of the other big issues and things that we've seen as well is all the first responders that have been coming to this location just to go into the hospital to get checked out themselves or check on some of the people that they have brought here. They've all had a very stoic and an almost emotionless look on their face, just stunned by possibly what they had to witness when they walked into Pulse nightclub and saw the mass casualty situation firsthand. So it's something that's going to affect all the different first responders who are at this location almost as much as it's affecting these families that have been out here for hours, still waiting to find out the latest in the status on their loved ones. So, Brett, at this point, we have still not learned about the amount of people who have been rushed to this location or how many people could also be dead inside a Pulse nightclub. The most important thing is that the situation is starting to come to an end as far as the emergency situation to end that shooter because the shooter is dead. As Bob mentioned, one of the biggest questions remaining is whether or not this person acted alone, whether or not this person could have left some devices behind that were booby-trapped. That was one of the detonations earlier that Orlando police was getting rid of a device that they were not sure whether or not that could have been a possible explosive. But again, if there are other shooters out there, that is part of the investigation. Also, how many people could have possibly been wounded and also killed inside the nightclub tonight.
All right, Stuart, as you mentioned, Orlando Police Department requiring a bus to get all of these witnesses onboarded and to a location where they can begin to talk to so many of them and find out their accounts of what transpired overnight. We want to go and rejoin Michelle Meredith. She is also live near ORMC this morning. She has been speaking to many witnesses, some that were inside of the club, others who are clearly here to support their family and showing up to that area to find out about their loved ones. Michelle rejoins us now. Michelle, who do you have with you this morning?
I have Julia. And Julia, you were telling me that your friend is working inside the club.
Yeah, he was working inside the club when it happened.
What did he tell you?
He just told me he's a military veteran, and once he heard one bullet go off, he hit the deck, but where he works in lighting, he wasn't able to see up. But when he got up, he said that there were just bodies everywhere, and that he just ran out, and they just kept telling him to run as fast as they can. But we're not sure. We're still waiting to hear from some friends who haven't called us back or texted us back, and he just seems really scared.
Have you been able to see him?
No. He's waiting for us to pick him up. They said a Lynx bus was gonna get him and drop him off somewhere, but that was like 4 hours ago. We've been here since. We don't know what's going on. His phone's like dead. We don't.
You were showing me some video. He was talking to you in the video. What was he saying?
The video is like this app Snapchat, and you can hear the bullets in the background going off. It was obviously some sort of heavy automatic. Yeah, you just hear him scared and crying and like not knowing what to do, but just trying to tell us what's going on. There's a lot of other people. We knew that there were some performers and trapped inside their dressing room, and for like a long time, and like only 2 hours ago did they escape through like a vent inside of the room. And but we're not sure about the other people who were trapped inside the bathrooms. It was one of my friend's sisters and another good friend of mine, and they haven't been able to contact us.
You haven't heard from them?
No, their family hasn't. Nobody's been contacted.
This has got to be anguish for you.
Yeah, it is. It's just random act of crazy violence. It's unnecessary.
Just your thoughts right now, Julia.
I just want to hear from my friends. I just want them to be home. I just want this to be over. Sorry.
Well, our thoughts are with you, Julia, and your friends. And again, we hope the best for them. And I have to say, as the sun is coming out right now, the reality of the situation is sinking in. We can see things clearer, and it is heartbreaking here. Live in Orlando, Michelle Meredith, WESH 2 News.
All right, do want to update you as Chief John Mina is going to be providing an update on the nightclub shooting at 7 o'clock this morning. We're going to carry that press conference live. Some of the questions that we've got for Chief Mina this morning in the Orlando Police Department is we understand that one shooter is dead, killed inside of the nightclub. It's unclear if that shooter was killed by police or whether or not he took his own life or was killed by someone else in that nightclub. We just understand that one shooter is dead. Now, some witnesses have been telling us for the last couple of hours that there were two shooters. So there's a little bit of a question mark there in terms of a possibility of a second shooter, but there's no confirmation on that. That's coming from witnesses inside there. As far as the Orlando Police Department has officially sent out is that the one shooter was killed. It's unclear in terms of any sort of motive here, and we do not have any details on this shooter. Shots coming out of there around between 2 and 3 this morning. Don't have a specific time. As you can imagine, a chaotic scene as a shooter shows up at the Pulse nightclub near the corner of Orange and Cayley Avenue in downtown Orlando this morning. As you're taking a look at a live scene, a live picture from up above on Chopper 2, you can see that large police presence still around there. No one getting inside or out, no one getting remotely close to that area. Shots between 2 and 3 this morning. This has been described, as you're seeing on your screen, as a mass casualty. We don't have the specifics on the number that were killed or the number that have been injured in this, but those patients being brought to ORMC.
And of course, then around 5 a.m., we heard a controlled explosion while our own Stuart Moore was live on TV, and I believe we have him back now. Stuart, what's happening by you at the moment?
Michelle, again, back here at the moment, we're at ORMC, where family members of some of the people who have just learned about this shooting when they wake up at 6 a.m. this morning have started to gather to find out whether or not their loved ones were injured in this. I just spoke to these men just to my right. They didn't want to go and speak on camera, but they told me that they know 4 of their friends are inside of the hospital right now. 3 more are unaccounted for at this point. Unsure whether or not those people are in the hospital or possibly in the nightclub when that shooting began, but they have at least 3 people that are unaccounted for, and that's one of the growing situations that we've heard from several different people who have gathered out here, just that they don't know at this point whether or not their loved one was one of those people who was taken to the hospital, one of the people that could potentially have died in this shooting. What we do know at this point, as you all have mentioned, is that the shooter is dead. That was the opening that law enforcement needed to start and try and get some of those people out of this location. We've learned that the police chief, the mayor, the sheriff, all will be offering comments on this mass shooting and this mass casualty situation in about 30 minutes from now. When we first started our broadcast at 5 a.m. this morning, that's when the situation was still very much active. We spoke to a witness who was outside near the nightclub when those shots first began. He recorded this video, and it's exclusive on WESH. Take a listen.
Oh my God, people are getting shot, dude. Oh my God, dude. Oh my
and
God.
That video
Shot, dude.
That video begins to loop, but we have learned that at least 25 shots were fired at that point. Witnesses told us that they heard a huge barrage of shots in the beginning. There was a lull period, and that's when more and more shots happened. Some people saying they heard up to 100 shots that were fired during this process. When we got on scene and started reporting live from this location, that's when we also saw several different bomb vehicles heading that direction. There was a possibility that a device could have also played a role in this. We also, on live TV this morning at 5 a.m., Brett, Michelle, as you all remember, we heard a detonation of a device, still undetermined whether or not that was dangerous, but take a listen to what we heard this morning. Gunshots. He says several other people are also inside of that restroom with him. And just on live TV, I'm not sure if you guys were able to hear that back at the station. And Pete, we can point that direction, but we just heard a loud explosion that just happened coming from that direction. Now, we have been seeing some bombs. And again, that was an OPD detonating a device that they were unsure at the time whether or not it was potentially hazardous to people gathered in that area. Several people for several hours were stuck inside of the nightclub. We spoke to a witness who says that one of his friends was locked in the bathroom after being wounded and was shot in the arm and was sitting there, as they described it, and sitting there and dying. We're unsure if that person was one of the people who was rushed to ORMC after that shooter was determined dead, but they said that they were wounded in the arm and just simply waiting for police officers to bust in and be able to save them. Now, at this point, we can still see a heavy presence of police and sheriff's deputies who are outside. You can see people are having questions. They've been asking these law enforcement officers questions throughout the morning, trying to figure out whether or not they can go into the hospital to see and find out whether or not their loved one has been admitted to this location. The hospital has remained on lockdown throughout this morning and overnight for fear that any other potential hazardous situation could walk through those doors. It's been exclusive to only emergency vehicles to get those patients in to this area to start and receive that treatment. The road is still blocked off heading to Pulse nightclub, just a quarter mile up the road from where we are standing right now. So no one is able to pass from Miller Avenue on Orange Avenue south of here. You cannot get to that point until you get all the way towards Michigan, where we will hear from the mayor and the police chief coming up in just a short while. So, Brett, that'll happen in about 30 minutes from now. We hope to get an update on the amount of people who were shot in this incident, possibly the amount of people who could have been killed in this incident, and exactly what this shooter's motivations may have been, could still be playing a major role in this investigation. Back to you.
All right, Stuart, thank you. Many people just waking up this morning on a Sunday morning, 6:34, and just to reset the scene for you, shots were fired between 2 and 3 this morning, Pulse nightclub, and you can see some of those victims being carried out not only by first responders, but really Good Samaritans jumping in to try to get these folks into an ambulance. Some were put into a police car and driven to the hospital. After this shooting, the shooter was inside. This is where this update at 7 o'clock from Orlando Police Department is potentially going to fill in some of the missing blanks here. Understandably, they're not going to be able to answer all of these questions, but that shooter was inside. A crisis negotiator was called to the scene shortly after you're watching this, because the shooter opening fire inside the nightclub was still inside. And we don't know specifically if this was a hostage situation. We understand that that shooter is dead. We don't know when that shooter died. We only know that police surrounded that area for really a couple of hours before they made confirmation that that shooter was in fact killed. We heard reports from some witnesses that that shooter had made references to a bomb. That's unconfirmed, but as you're taking a look at right now, that bomb squad was called in. We did hear that controlled detonation at 5 o'clock this morning, so we're hoping to get some more details from Chief John Mina, who's going to be providing us with a press conference at 7 o'clock this morning. But really, going back to that scene where that shooter was still inside, we saw some patients, Michelle, being brought to the hospital 5:30, 6 hours after the shooting. So presumably so many people still inside. Again, this is a mass casualty situation as it's been described. We don't have specific numbers on those killed. We don't have specific numbers on those that were injured. But so many people for hours after being shot did not get medical treatment because they were still stuck inside that nightclub where that shooter was, and police surrounded that area. And then we saw kind of another wave of patients being brought to the hospital. Again, going back live over to Pulse nightclub. That area is shut down. Yeah. If you live downtown, if you're driving downtown, a lot of streets downtown are blocked off. Heavy police presence. A lot of first responders still in that area.
It's just a massive scene out there. As you can see, live look over the scene right now. And as we heard Stuart saying at ORMC, they are busing witnesses to interview them to find out exactly what happened. They need more specific accounts to find out. Like we said, there's a question of if there was one shooter, if there was two shooters, what exactly happened during that time period when there was a shooter inside that club. Right now, we want to go live to Bob Keeling. Bob, what can you tell us from where you are near the hospital?
Well, Michelle, just in the last few minutes, the folks who'd been standing here on the corner outside the emergency room have all gone to the north of the building, where we understand from one of the folks who'd been waiting, she told me that they are anticipating getting some updated information on those wounded folks, and that will come as a great relief to them. I know personally I've spoken to at least 3 parents with wounded children, one mother who believes her son was shot in the chest multiple times. And they are desperate for information at this point. I also want to mention that we just got some eyewitness account of this shooting from an employee inside the Pulse nightclub. Let's take a listen to that.
Once he heard one bullet go off, he hit the deck, but where he works in lighting, he wasn't able to see up. But when he got up, he said that there were just bodies everywhere, and that he just ran out, and they just kept telling them to run as fast as they can, but we're not sure. We're still waiting to hear from some friends who haven't called us back or texted us back, and he just seems really scared.
There are just so many of stories like that out here this morning along Orange Avenue in the wake of this mass casualty incident. And Brett and Michelle, I think it's important to point out that not only is Chief Mina going to be part of this press conference, also Mayor Dyer, Sheriff Demings, and interestingly also the FBI is also on the scene here, according to this press release, which makes you question what the motive of this shooting was, and again, whether there was another one or perhaps more shooters at this nightclub in addition to the one that police have now confirmed are dead. That's been the big question here outside the hospital all morning, is there somebody else that managed to get away? What is the fate of the people who are wounded? How many were there? And the big question is, what could be the motive on a night when this was, by all accounts, a very peaceful crowd enjoying a late evening at a nightclub, and then this turned into absolute terror. So we'll throw it back to you in the studio, but we should get more information from those officials now in less than half an hour. Let's go back to you.
Yeah, we'll be waiting for that update in about 20 minutes from those officials. Right now, Orlando police are tweeting out at this time they want anyone who was at Pulse nightclub and was a witness to come to the Orlando police headquarters. They're looking for any information that could help them in this case and find out any answers. Now, that police headquarters, if you don't know, is 100 South Huey Avenue. So if you were there, if you know anything about what happened, if you saw anything at that time, go down to Orlando police headquarters. That is what police are requesting at this time.
And so many witnesses from this scene. We've heard from many of them this morning. One witness telling us that they, were inside the bathroom when they heard these shots being fired, and then you quickly just try to run for cover. When something like this happened, that person said the same thing. They just were not sure. Mm-hmm. You heard a gunshot fire, weren't sure if that was part of whatever else was going on inside, or if it was something unrelated. But we've heard from a lot of witnesses this morning, and police are going to be speaking with so many of them as we continue to get all the details from this mass casualty at Pulse nightclub in downtown Orlando. And that press conference coming up at 7 o'clock this morning, we'll figure out if we're going to hear any more information about this shooter that is confirmed dead.
We also have Stuart Moore live outside of the hospital. Stuart, you've been talking to witnesses this morning. What do you have for us at this time?
Michelle, we spoke to one witness who was inside the nightclub when those shots first began, and he says that the first thing he heard was the loud shots, and people weren't sure if it was part of the music or if it was a joke. But that's when everyone immediately froze and dropped. But then the rumors started around the building that this was just a joke, and so people started to stand again. And as soon as people started to stand, that's when they realized that this was a real situation. They saw people who weren't getting up, and they heard more gunshots followed by that. And that's when people started to fall around them. And people tell me that they were able to crawl out of the nightclub. Now, the guy that we spoke to who described that story says that the people that were with him, several of which were wounded and brought to the hospital. He was not wounded. He was able to get out safely, but one of his friends was unable, at least two of his friends were unable to get out. We spoke to him shortly after the shooting first happened, right outside of ORMC.
We heard gunshots. They said that they were actually like, it was just like a joke, which technically it wasn't. Everybody was on the floor. They went up again. They were about to leave. But then the gunshot came again. We scrawled all the way down to we were crawling in the club or whatnot. That's pretty much it. We have still friends in there. We actually have two friends in there. One has a wounded on his leg, and then the other one on the arm.
You've heard from both of them, though?
One of them, the one with the hand wounded, he feels like he's gonna die in there.
How lucky do you feel to be alive?
Oh, I feel lucky to be here with you.
And obviously, that person, after I got finished speaking to him, he noted the fact that today is Sunday, and then to ask for prayers for not only his friends and family, but people that he didn't know who were inside the club who were also wounded during this mass shooting, mass casualty situation, as Orlando police have described it. We spoke to a woman who's now gone inside the hospital. They've allowed the people who were standing outside to go around on the other side so they can find out whether or not their loved ones are inside the hospital. Bob Keeling was actually interviewing her on live TV when I was standing next to them, and the woman was her son and his boyfriend. This was a gay club, as you all know. The boyfriend was actually shot multiple times, according to this woman. She said that he was rushed to the hospital. They knew he was in the hospital and in surgery, but her son was unaccounted for at that point. And she poured her heart out to us, telling us that she just wanted to know what happened to her son. And we heard that story from so many people who were out here. They wanted to know what happened to their loved one at the time of that shooting, because they weren't able to hear from them. And the woman overcame with emotion. And Brett and Michelle, I know you guys witnessed this, but so our viewers at home can understand exactly the situation that people are going through.
All right, clearly a technical issue there with Stewart, but he's been outside the hospital for multiple hours this morning. He was also close to that scene at Pulse nightclub, as close as you could get, probably around 4 o'clock this morning when that had that area blocked off. But to finish up his point, so many of those loved ones are showing up early this morning trying to figure out, learning really the chaos of what happened last night, and learning that a shooter opened fire. As we continue to take a live look over Pulse nightclub right now, obviously a large police presence in that area. They've set up really a headquarters there as they continue to take a look at this is a mass casualty situation, so this is a huge crime scene, both outside and inside. But from so many of these witnesses that Stewart has spoken with, that Michelle has spoken with, they're just overcome. It's obviously an incredibly emotional experience when these shots were fired just after 2 o'clock this morning, whether they get a phone call right after that, waking them up in the middle of the night, finding out that their loved ones have been hit in gunfire, they're going to be brought to the hospital, or they're showing up and waking up this morning learning about what has transpired in this nightclub when shots were fired. Again, it's unclear how many people have been injured and how many killed, but you see it on your screen, a mass casualty situation.
So this is video from earlier in the night when Orlando police were stationed outside of the club with their guns drawn, trying to get a hold of this situation. So earlier this morning, as we know now, the shooter inside the nightclub is confirmed dead, but as you can see, the massive presence that this brought out to the crime scene, a number of agencies are out there trying to get control of what was going on inside. Brett, you said that there were reports that the shooter was locked inside of the club with the club goers who were inside as well. So this, again, was from earlier in the evening.
And that's where it's a little bit unclear as well. Again, we're getting that update here in 15 minutes from police. So that's where we're hoping to kind of fill in some of the gaps here. When that shooter opened fire, some people were able to run off. Even those that were hit were able to get medical attention and brought to the hospital. Many others, we don't know how many, but many others were still stuck inside this club for essentially, we believe, hours, because the shots coming out at just after 2 o'clock this morning, we only learned really less than maybe an hour ago that the shooter was confirmed dead, and then we saw more people showing up at the hospital. So we don't know how many people were still inside. We do know a crisis negotiator was called. It's unclear if this was truly a hostage situation or what was going on when that shooter entered in there and then for hours was still with those people inside, many others being brought to the hospital.
And again, we are going to hear from Orlando Police as well as the FBI and the Sheriff's Department in less than 15 minutes now, and they are asking any witnesses to come to their headquarters to give them any information. Like we said, this was a massive crime scene. They need to know as much as they can about what happened, and people are still showing up at the hospital right now. Stuart Moore is joining us back with some witness encounter. Stuart?
That's right, Michelle. And as we mentioned, as the story that I was telling just a short time ago before we got cut off, of the woman whose son was unaccounted for, she knew his boyfriend was in surgery inside ORMC, but she was uncertain as to his status, whether or not he was trapped inside of Pulse nightclub or if he had been brought here or possibly even killed. But we were interviewing her on live television when she just reached out. I was the closest person to her, and she just grabbed me, overcome with emotion. Take a listen.
My son was at the nightclub with his boyfriend and other friends, and I know that his boyfriend has been shot multiple times and is in the emergency room, but I don't know where my son is. No one can tell me where my son is. If he's been shot, if he's dead, no one knows, but they told me there are fatalities.
And you haven't heard from him? You haven't gotten a phone call?
We texted him, called him, and he's not answering the phone. But he was sitting right next to his boyfriend, and his boyfriend definitely was shot with multiple gunshots and taken in the ambulance. So another friend who was in the bathroom at the time said he heard over 100 shots, and it was still active. They weren't taking any bodies out of the club.